Einen schönen guten Abend und herzlich willkommen zu unserem Transatlantic Tuesday. Schön, dass Sie heute Abend dabei sind. I'm switching to English. My name is Friederike Schulte and I'm the director of the Carl-Schurz-Haus in Freiburg, the German-American Institute. And just right at the beginning, some tech info. You're welcome to leave your cameras on because we are encouraging to see your faces and hope that you can also post some questions in the chat later on and get involved in the discussion. But please make sure that your microphones are turned off to ensure the best sound quality possible. Thank you. And please note that this event is being recorded. If you don't like to be seen, then turn your camera off. But oh no, it won't be seen, right? I think only the pinned people will be seen, so you're fine. But it will be published afterwards on the Carl-Schurz-Haus YouTube channel. So I'm very glad to welcome 4 familiar faces on our panel. May I say friends of the Carl-Schurz-Haus tonight? You're an experienced panel. We just discovered that this is the 4th time you're talking with one another. We had some other members dropping in and out. So welcome Reggie, Esther from the US, Patrick and Jorrell. Most of you have a long-standing connection with the Carl-Schurz-Haus over many years. And in the course of the almost last 2 years, ever since the horrible killing of George Floyd, we have turned to you to hear your take on the situation, maybe on police violence, racism, or the general state of US politics. And it's always been really insightful to listen to you, and it made me realize personally as well that no matter how well connected we might be and how often we might bump into each other on a regular basis, it's rare that one discusses these more sensitive subjects. So I'm glad we're taking the time, or you're taking the time to do so and to share your insights. Tonight's topic is being African American in Germany. And I will introduce Jorrell briefly to you, and he will introduce the other panelists later because Jorrell will be moderating this conversation tonight, but hopefully also share his own insights. Jorrell Rush-Kittle was born in Connecticut. His parents were involved and active in the military and the US police force. Jorrell is an immunologist working on his degree at the University in Freiburg. He's also an English teacher at the Carl-Schurz-Haus with quite a large fan base. He's raising a biracial daughter here in Germany, and he also brews beers under the label Brauerhahn, which are very tasty. This is off topic, but a nice little fun fact I thought I would share. We would like to welcome your questions in the chat later on, so please post them and I will help moderate, or Jorrell will do it. I'm sure we'll figure it out. And before I hand over to Jorrell, I'd like to mention and stress that this event is a cooperation with the Colloquium Politicum and the Arnold Bergstresser Institute and the Africa Center for Transregional Research, because they are organizing an Africa conference here in Freiburg. And I'd like to welcome Professor Mehler, who is heading these institutes, to say a few words and extend a welcome and maybe talk about the conference as well. I'd like to thank you, Professor Mehler, because it was your idea that we get involved in kind of the context of this conference to add maybe an American perspective on what African American might mean. So I'm glad you're here, and I'll hand over to you and to the panel.
Yeah, thank you, Friederike. Thanks for that opportunity. I'm particularly grateful that the Carl-Schurz-Haus was willing to integrate this event into a series of talks in preparation of this big conference that you already announced. It's called Africa-Europe Reciprocal Perspectives. And it's the Africa Center for Transregional Research, which is organizing this in exactly 1 month's time. The aforementioned series is organized by the Colloquium Politicum at Freiburg University, which cooperates regularly with your house. But of course, it is first of all still part of your program. Now, some words maybe on our conference, on us. While some may think that today's talk has only limited overlaps with the upcoming conference, I would claim that they are wrong. within the African studies community in Germany and beyond, probably also in the US, new discussions are held about the multifaceted entanglements between continents and what this means in terms of academic production, not only on Africa, but also on Europe and the US, on European, African, or African-European and American relations, and finally on Black Germans in all of this, whether of Afro-American descent or any other descent. So don't get me wrong, it would be fully counterproductive to nourish expectations that all Black Germans are naturally experts on Africa. This would be nearly as bad as to expect them to be good dancers or good drummers and all that. So in our upcoming conference, we actually have one so-called stream on Black Germans and African academics in the German university scene, and I think for good reasons. The overall impression is that it is time to question a certain mainstream and to at least allow for a multiplicity of views from quite diverse perspectives on objects that might also not be as set and immobile as they seem. What is probably less consensual is that German universities contribute to structural racism in this society. Personally, I think they do, although mostly unconsciously. This must change, and it can change. I'm curious to learn more about the views of today's speakers, but would not like to impose any additional subjects to what is on your mind, and please just discuss what you want to discuss. And thank you again for this opportunity of cooperation. I wish you a fertile discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Mela. So I think I can take over now. So I was already introduced. My name is Jorrell, and I'd like to introduce the other members of the panel first. So I'll start with Esther. Esther, can you wave hi to the people so they know who you are? Good. So this is Esther. Esther is a newly married attorney who lives in the US, but her life is still focused on Germany and Europe. She lived in Germany for nearly 6 years, working on her PhD with the University of Freiburg and the Max Planck Society. Esther's awesome 22-year-old daughter lives in Freiburg. Good, and the next person I'd like to introduce is Patrick. Patrick, can you? There you go, there's Patrick. So when asked about his background, Patrick said he considers himself to be a second-generation Haitian American, born and raised in and around the city of New York. He moved to Germany in 2011 to pursue a master's degree in engineering and to be closer to his life partner and her son, who are from Freiburg. He is currently working in Freiburg as a business intelligence consultant and also a co-founder of the online school LearnEasy.com. And that's LearnEasy.com. Yeah, give a shout out to his business. So, and last but definitely not least, Reginald, Reggie, AKA Sir Reggie. Can you let everybody know who you are? There you are. All right, so Sir Reggie is an American hip hop artist teacher from Philadelphia. He has lived in Freiburg for almost 15 years. He enjoys spending time in the forest, hiking, jogging, riding his bike, and swimming. Good, so now you know a little bit about us and our backgrounds. So one thing I'd like to say in the open is to both the participants in the panel and the people listening, when you think about your questions, I want you to be frank, I want you to be open and to be honest, and don't be afraid to be wrong, because that's the first step towards us all being more right at the end of the day. So please say whatever you feel. With all puns intended, I'm going to start with a black and white question. And so from Reggie, Patrick, and Esther, I would like a yes or no answer. The event is called Being African American in Germany. Reggie, are you African American?
No.
No.
I'm not an African American. Nope.
Patrick, are you African American?
Nope, I'm not African American.
So we got two no's. Okay. Esther, are you African American?
It depends.
It depends.
Give the lawyer answer.
All right. Excellent. All right. So we got two no's and a gray zone here. So then, Reggie, I have another question for you, black or white. Am I African American?
No.
Okay, good. Patrick, same question. Am I African American?
Your parents? I wouldn't say
So
no.
you're thinking of some questions. What questions would you ask me before you determined whether I'm African American or not?
Did your parents grow up in or your parents descendants of slaves from the U.S.?
Okay. On my mother's side, yes. My father is as Puerto Rican as they come.
Okay, so you're mixed. You're 50%.
50%. Okay.
Yeah.
A no to my answer. Am I African American?
No, not 100%.
Okay, not 100%. Okay, Esther, am I African American? And don't say it depends.
No, based on your answers to the last question, I would say no.
Okay, you would say no. Okay, so we're all starting an event that's called Being African American in Germany, but none of us are African American, it seems. Esther, can you think of another term that is inclusive for us four that sort of differentiates us from maybe the Afro-Deutsche or Africans growing up in other countries? How would you name the event next time?
I would say Black American. I think that the term African American is pretty limited, and I think it's an identity that's multifaceted nowadays, and so it's hard to just use that term. So I definitely think the term Black has a historical connection and a more recent connection to the way one identifies themselves, as well as is identified by others. But I think it's more or less the American that binds us all. And I think that descriptor of how we look is probably what will the focus be, because when we pass other people and when we connect with each other is our Blackness or our skin tone. If we do identify as Black or dark skin, but Black is the more common term that is used. And I think it probably would be a little bit more fitting to the discussions of nowadays. African in nationality is very different even now here in America, because it's so inclusive. But Black is something very different, and from my opinion, that I think people are starting to explore a little bit more as far as their identity.
Okay, very well said. All right, so being Black American in Germany is a potential suggestion for us. Reggie, do you have another suggestion, or do you agree with that suggestion for the next event?
I mean, I agree. I mean, we could always name the event something that kind of describes the way we appear on the outside, but also what we are culturally. And so you could always use a cultural point of view, the American or the modern American periscope. It doesn't always have to necessarily be about, race, you know what I mean? I mean, that can always come in at some point in the discussion, but there are so many other aspects to who we are that we can sort of focus on, the American kaleidoscope, even something like that, for example, because when you look through a kaleidoscope, you see a variety of different colors and shades and that type of thing, and we can discuss what does that mean to each of us, for example.
Okay, excellent. And Patrick, do you also agree that being Black American is a fitting description for the next event or fitting title?
Yeah, I think it's okay. I mean, that would be probably the more appropriate title. And I think Esther hit it right on the nose. We are more connected by the superficial color of our skins than we are by our backgrounds, so to say. And I think it would be great for the next event to just say, yeah, being Black in, Germany, Black Americans in Germany, to be more specific about, where we're coming from in terms of nationality. And that would be enough to group our little group together. And I like what Reggie said. I mean, yeah, the kaleidoscope of America coming together, it gives a much more open panel for the future for Carl-Schurz-Haus. But hey, I like you guys, so I'm happy with this, as well. So I'm good, Black American or the kaleidoscope of America, whatever you guys want to call it. But it's great just to be able to talk to you all. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Okay. And so Patrick, how was your German? Is it good?
No, it's not very good. I've been here since 2011, and I've taken many German courses, and I've only, I'm sad to say, reached the B2 level. I've taken the exam, the TELC, but I just barely passed it. Yeah, but I'm hoping with this new job, where I only get to speak German, that it'll improve. It's a big challenge to learn German, and that's always something. That experience of trying to assimilate into the country. The language here is the huge barrier, I think, for a lot of people, and for me, it's a huge one as well. I guess that would be a good question for the rest of the panelists. Did they have the same issues as I did?
We'll definitely get to that later. Yeah. The reason I asked you the question about the German is, if we print out all of these pamphlets for the next one, being Black American in Germany, how do we tell the Germans to translate that? Is it, Schwarze Amerikaner in Deutschland, or is it Afroamerikaner in Deutschland? How would you like it to be translated into German, Patrick?
That's a hard one for me. I'm not a translator on that level. I would say Schwarz. I would say Schwarze Amerikaner. I don't know if that's racist or not, but you couldn't say that word, Negro, so you wouldn't use that,
Okay, we'll throw all the N-words out of the window right now.
Yeah, exactly. But Schwarz is okay. I'd be okay with that. I'm not sure how. See, that's a good question. Yeah, I'm not sure how that kind of, would fly with actual Germans when they would see a poster like that,
Okay.
Yeah.
Reggie, do you have any insights into the German translation?
I mean, there's certain things that are very difficult to translate, anytime that you try to move from one language into another, there are such subtle nuances. How many times have you been trying to translate something and you might talk to a German speaker, or the German speaker might be trying to explain something to you in English, and the German word that keeps on coming up is not the one, or the English word is not precisely exactly like what they mean. So it's always a bit of a riddle. And it's something only through getting to know one another that we kind of break those barriers down. And so I don't really have any insight into that either. I'm not quite sure what exactly would sort of, perfectly translate into German in describing our event. I'm not sure.
All right, and I'll ask Esther, lastly, of course, before we move on. What do we call it in German?
I think Schwarz is one of those words that, even though it might be new for the German context, I've seen the word Black being translated in other cultures and to describe those of darker skin in Latin America, Central America, in various contexts. And even in America, I mean, I remember when Black was first used, a lot of people preferred African-American to Black because they thought that Black in the literal sense, and we always joked about this as well, is just the meaning of Black is, dark. Like, why is it called the black market, illicit or something like that? But then also this concept of being Black became embraced over time to be young, gifted, and Black pride, and so I think with the word, there are always going to be some discomfort for people who are not used to this terminology. But speaking from the American perspective, at least from my perspective as being an American, and the history of this word here, it's grown to mean things and go anywhere. And you're Black if you're Nigerian in in Sweden, you know, to be Black means something very different as a concept that people are now becoming more comfortable with. And so I've even heard Schwarze Menschen often in Germany. So I think that is if we want to have these conversations that can transcend different contexts, then maybe this word Schwarz should be used more often so we can have some sort of connection no matter what we're talking about as it relates to being of brown or darker skin or of African descent in society.
Sorry. Okay, so the next question I have is, so the term Black and the term Schwarz, I always tell an anecdote of when I came here for the first time. Somebody excitedly ran up to me and said, "Hey, you have to go to this party on Friday." They said, "They're playing Black music." And from America, I had never heard that term before. So I had to research, I had to Google that. And then I realized that Black music was basically a party in which you only played, you know, rap music, hip hop, or R&B. So basically music that is typically associated with Black Americans. In the US, it was often called urban music, you know, which, you know, Tyler, the creator, said urban is the new N-word, you know, that you might be able to discuss about that. But so Reginald, you described yourself as a hip hop person. Why do you think people associate those genres with us? And is it okay to say Black music, in your opinion?
Wow, that's an excellent question. I didn't know this was going to come up at this part of the discussion, but let me try to answer that question from experience. In the 90s, I was living in Atlanta, and I was up for an interview with Columbia Records, who actually, Sony actually had a pressing plant, I should say, located in Georgia. And during the course of the interviewer talked about me somehow being a part of the Black music department. And I said, "What is that?" In the interview. Mm-hmm. And I personally was just I was just kind of offended to hear an executive describe our music in that particular category. And of course, I got an attitude already like, well, where shall we start? Are we going to go back to ragtime? Are we going to talk about blues or rock and roll or jazz? When did we not have our finger on the pulse of American music? And so for me, I just prefer the term American music, just for me personally. I understand what's being said when you mention the expression Black music, but it just leaves out so many other genres. It doesn't. It's as if to say that only Black people can come up with this particular thing and do this thing, and we're kind of like out of that. You know what I'm saying? And so, long story short, no, I don't. I think it should be taken down. If you go to the record store, Jorrell, perhaps you'll notice if you go over to the hip hop section, you'll see something that says German hip hop. And then in a small corner, you'll see Black music. They got everything in that little thing. And so I agree with you when you talked about party and dance music. Everything considered Black music is in that one section, and it's a small one, and it's dropping more and more. It's going out of business, which might actually be a good thing to see anyway. But no, I just personally, I understand the concept, but no, I don't really agree with it. And I didn't take that job.
Understandable. Esther, why do you think, so Reggie mentioned that, you know, you can find our footprints, that's a hard thing to even say. You can find the footprints of Black Americans in rock music, jazz, and pretty much every musical genre. Why do you think it's been limited, Black music, to just hip hop and R&B? Why isn't rock and roll music in the Black music section?
Well, I definitely think it's access. I think it's mainstream access to the music, because when I think of, you know, rock And when I think of artists who are identified as Black rock artists or whatever, yeah, they're just in the rock genre section. I mean, they're not in, let's just think about Spotify, for example. There is no, there might be playlists that have Black artists, but when you're looking for rock music and, you're looking for, a particular artist, let's go with country, like Darius Rucker. I mean, he's a country artist. He's considered Black or African-American by others. I'm not sure how he identifies, but he's country. And he's not Black country, he's country. And I think a lot of people, I agree with what Reggie says, because when it's categorized by the skin color of the artist, it doesn't get access by the rest of the world. So I understand, like when I have these conversations with my counterparts who might be identified as white or identify themselves as, non-person of color, when it comes to talking about certain music that I grew up to listening on the radio, they just don't know, because it was always categorized as colored music, or even back in the day, race records, which meant Black records. And so that limited the access. It was like, no, we can't play these things mainstream because the other part of the country, mainstream America, which was white America, they won't relate to it. And that was the assumption. And this was like outside of jazz. So when you think about jazz records were never classified as Black jazz. It was always jazz. So when it comes to some of these other newer genres like hip hop, even R&B and the way they're viewed, I think whenever they're categorized as Black, it limits the access to the mainstream, which often hurts the artists themselves, because their records are not getting accepted or even given a chance, because the mainstream listener thinks that, oh, well, this is only for a Black audience, so maybe I shouldn't engage into it. So I think that definitely needs to change, because a lot of these songs are just great music that should be played in any club, not just a Black music night. Like, it needs to be played, in any night, because the music is the same. And a lot of times you can't tell what the person looks like just by listening to the record.
Good connection. Patrick, do you have any experience with Black music? Have you ever been, for example, expected to be an expert in Black music or to have a particular taste in music because of your skin color?
From my side, I could say I've had some experiences with that, but for me, it's just an opportunity to break out some, breakdancing moves or something like that, and luckily, I learned how to breakdance in college a little bit, so it doesn't hurt me, but yeah, it is surprising that some people would just expect, because of my skin color, that I would know a lot about hip hop or rap. I'm not a rapper at all, not like Reg. Reg is, I've never been in that well, but I did like to break dance. So, but there are lots of situations like that come up where, people, because of my skin color, expect me to have some kind of knowledge, about the Black experience in America. And yeah, sometimes, I can say I can relate, and other times I can say, no, I can't relate. I can't connect when it comes to what you've seen on television, about Black people, because I didn't live in the projects. I got lucky, and I didn't have those kinds of negative experiences that others had. So when it comes to music, it's similar. To be honest, when I was a kid, I didn't learn how to, rap, because I was learning how to play the clarinet, so, so nobody would ask me about classical music or anything like that. But yeah, but rap, maybe. Yeah, It's happened a couple times.
Okay. Good. And so the next question I'll actually give to Reggie. So you said something I found interesting. You said they labeled our music as Black music. And I think that me, instinctually, I have a feeling of possessiveness to rap music and rap culture. And I think that's a negative side of me. So for example, recently, or actually about a year ago, I saw a bunch of German teenagers walking around with a Straight Outta Compton t-shirt because they had just seen the movie. And I viscerally just I didn't say anything to them, of course, but I was viscerally just disgusted that, they would just wear this and just sort of take our culture for granted. Why was that wrong? Or how should I feel when I see things like that, Reggie?
I mean, you know what? I think it depends on how much they know about the music. Are they really taking time to really get into it? Are they wearing the shirt because they're somehow jumping on the bandwagon of cool? That particular film, I think it did over $200 million at the box office. Now those are pretty huge numbers. And so already that particular movie is opening up conversations in places where people generally might not have talked about the biography of NWA. I have a student who came to me and he was like, Reggie, I want to know all about Ice Cube. Can you tell me about Ice Cube? This is a German kid. And he sat down and he started researching the group. He wanted to understand just how active NWA were in terms of bringing attention to police corruption, specifically the Los Angeles Police Department. And it was very, very interesting to sort of to have a more dynamic conversation. And so, to be honest with you, it really just kind of depends on where that person is in their own learning and growth. I can understand how you feel, but I'll tell you something. I'd rather see the NWA shirt than the rap guy shirt. and I think because again, we can talk about how those guys actually grew. The guy that was the gangster who had a problem with authority, Ice Cube, who went from being, one of the greatest, writers in hip hop, here this guy goes, now he's doing Disney films. So again, you can now open up a different discussion about growth, about how to channel your anger. You weren't happy with American life, you got a bad rap, maybe you were born in the wrong situation, you wrote records about that, but now you've grown and now you can look back and you can talk to young people now about that experience. And so I guess it just depends on what they were doing. But you know what? It's now in clothing, and I just hope that the kids have an appreciation for who these people are. And if the appreciation is there, I'm okay. I can understand how you feel, but I guess it's almost like a case by case basis. That when they came up to you, did they ask you anything? Did they start a conversation? How were they behaving? Did they say anything?
They walked by, they were playing the music, so we didn't interact, but I saw the shirt and I just reacted viscerally. I was just, yeah. So, and then I realized it's sort of perhaps unfair, and I'll put this to Esther. So for example, if they had walked by in a cowboy hat, singing Garth Brooks, I would have had no problem with that. And I don't think anybody here would say they have to know a lot about the struggle of the Southern white man and things like that. So why is it that there's this extra hurdle when Germans try to get involved with our culture compared to other people's culture?
Well, I think it's also a understanding of, like Reggie said, kind of the context of it, and also your personal connection with seeing people that look like them with rap music. It's funny that you mentioned that, because here in Indianapolis, there's going to be a Wu-Tang concert. And I've been to a lot of sets where Wu-Tang music is played, and it's not people that look like us, And then also keep in mind that when NWA first came out, a lot of the controversy wasn't because people in Black neighborhoods was listening to NWA. It was white teenagers in the suburbs that was listening to NWA in the 90s. So it was about that, the music, the access that a different populace of people who didn't have those experiences, singing those songs with those lyrics, using the N-word, that was jolting for America. and getting used to that. So this is something that I've always been used to. It wasn't until Eminem first came out that people had this idea, okay, yeah, so this particular, population in rap is a little bit more to get used to. But back in the day, a lot of people felt just how you felt. They were like, whoa, this is new, this is different. And I think it's just a matter of understanding that there is an opportunity for education connected to that, like Reggie said. And it might just take that interaction with those kids that have those straight out of Compton t-shirts to be able to understand, why is it that they connect to the music? Because a lot of times it is that anger. When you are a teenager and you do have interactions with the police or the polizei, it can be very similar. That response, the negative response to authority, I think is what a lot of people in certain generations, not just racial groups, have or can connect to. And so there may be an opportunity there, but also there are a lot of issues. So I wouldn't say you were wrong at all. I think it's just a matter of, your experience with, people that might look white, German, or white, who listen to that kind of music, and what that might mean to you, especially as feeling as if either you're a fan of the music, and how we are always, wanting to keep our artists close to us, even if it's somebody nobody else knows. As soon as they get big, you're like, yeah, I was the first person listening to them. So, it also can be a very personal thing that we have with the music. I don't think you're wrong. I think it's natural. But I also think it'll change with time, or even present new opportunities.
Good. Okay, so the next aspect of African-American, Black American culture I wanted to talk about was cuisine. Let's see, Patrick, I know you're Haitian, you got the Haitian background, but do you know what soul food is? Or what does soul food mean to you?
Like food from the South, New Orleans, specifically in my mind, Cajun cuisine, a little bit of Haitian flavor probably came in the background, because it's, influenced by the French colonies, and yeah.
Oh, I think his connection went out. While he's waiting, Reggie, can you give me a little bit more about soul food? What does it mean to you?
Well, soul food, I guess it could be, it's a little tricky for me because they've had to really kind of refine it over the years. What do we call this? This is a type of calorie bomba, this kind of a calorie bomb of just macaroni and cheese, and sometimes very fattening food. You have, of course, I believe that the orientation of the term derives from the scraps that were left over from the quote unquote master's table, for example, during the time of slavery, right? And so if you had, for example, whatever was left over, whatever the maid or the butler or the field hands, whoever was able to get food, if it was something really, really good, you know what I mean? They were able to turn it into something good. Now we taste it and it's really, really good, but I think that it's kind of a menu of different foods, generally from the South, as Patrick pointed out, that's kind of like evolved. So for example, when I went to Atlanta, everybody knows about Sylvia's, right? Sylvia's out of Harlem. Sylvia's is one of probably the best, it's said to be one of the best soul food restaurants on the East Coast. And she opened up a second location in Atlanta. So here's what I think, okay? So like, before, if you wanted some soul food, you might have to go to like the Rib Shack or like some kind of like hole in the wall special place out of the, usually maybe like, in the inner city perhaps, where you could get some collard greens, you could get, some fried chicken, you could get some, anything considered, something that we would eat, as quote unquote African Americans, right? usually something that your grandmother would make. You know, grandma always had something, you know, cooking in the kitchen. You know, she'd learned, you know, all these recipes that had been passed down from her grandmother and so forth, generation to generation. So anyway, Sylvia's, this was like the new soul food place. You would walk in, the food was very expensive, very progressive. You now saw quote unquote African-American, Black Americans seated at fine tables with fine linen, and everyone is sitting around. I would like to have some peach cobbler, please. And so it's really kind of evolved, and it's come from a long way down from the line of slavery to now. Catfish, macaroni and cheese. And by the way, one particular soul food dish that everybody knows well, I'm sure, excuse me, I'm sure you've heard about it. It's notorious, okay? It's infamous, chitlins. Chitlins is soul food, straight up. And my grandmother and my mother used to say, be careful about whose chitlins you eat because they might not clean them well. I grew up on that. And so my mother somehow can make, I generally cannot eat chitlins. This is pig intestines, everybody. We know that, pig intestines. Okay, so again, another soul food delicatessen. Be careful about the chitlins you eat. So that's my.
So Reggie, have you ever Googled? Have you ever opened up Google Maps and Googled soul food when you were looking at Germany?
No, never. I've never thought that it was actually here. No, is it here? Do they have soul food restaurants?
Wait. I'll get to that. So I did that today. Esther, have you ever done that? Google Maps, Germany, and Google soul food. Okay, good.
Oh yeah.
Maybe you'll have the same issue I had today. Patrick, have you ever done that? Probably not.
No, not really. That's a good one. Yeah.
So I'll tell you the results of my thing today. Because we'll start with Reggie because you've never done it before. Then we'll go to Patrick. So I Googled soul food today while looking at Germany. One of the first hits I got was a restaurant in Bavaria. Clicked on their menu. Okay, they were serving Carpaccio, Spätzle, Schwarzwälder Kirschtorte, and that was on the menu. So and the restaurant was called Soul Food Kitchen. So then I zoomed in on Freiburg, and right in Emmendingen, I got a hit, Soul Food Queens. And I'm sure these are lovely people, not criticizing them at all. But it was two German women, and they specialize in making Black Forest specialties. But it's not Seelenfutter. It's not something with German, you know, even though I have an issue with Seelenfutter also. But Reggie, what is your reaction to hearing that? You know, is that okay to call it a soul food restaurant and serve German food?
You know, what it shows me is that, you know, either they're biting and they're trying to sort of take something that belongs to their culture. They're trying to appropriate the culture. I'm not quite sure, because what I'm learning more and more is that people's concepts are evolving and changing. And so what might have been considered soul food at one time might have changed once it got over here, depending on who these people were exposed to. I don't know where these people got this expression from. I think that there was I forgot where I ran into this person, but just to piggyback off that point, in the US, there are these delicatessens that you find popping up in, let's say, the South, and they have now taken Subway sandwiches that are famous, of course, up north, Philadelphia, New York City, and they say, listen, we make original Philadelphia hoagies. Now, the owner, he was from Philly, and he said that what separates a Philadelphia hoagie submarine sandwich from everybody else is the flour, the ingredients. And so the bread has to be made a very, very special way. So my question is, when we talk about soul food, do we insist, or must we insist, that it be made with certain kind of ingredients that you can only find in southern regions of the United States? So for example, I'll open up a soul food restaurant because I have a parent or grandparent that came from Atlanta, Georgia, and she passed down to me her famous peach cobbler recipe. Okay, you know, how do we expect such folks to follow the letter of the law when it comes to soul food? It might be impossible. To be honest with you, you know what, if it works, hey, get your money. I'm not mad at you. Get your money, do whatever you got to do to make it. If you say, hey, we sell soul food, if nobody knows the difference, what else? That's nothing new. We've seen that movie before. Okay. No, I'm not mad at it.
All right. Good. Esther, what do you think about soul food and its sort of redefinition here?
Yeah, so I'm not mad at it. I'm not comfortable with it. It's best to know, like, that's why I have to zoom in on the descriptions, because I think you have soul food, which is as we are thinking about it as a cultural reference, especially that's more dominant in our distinction of this cuisine in the US. And then you have people that use this concept that food that's good for the soul, as far as comfort food is concerned. And you have some people that, like Reggie said, depending on how they came to this term, that might use it as, this is food that's good for the soul. Thinking about like their grandma's food or food that they are familiar with growing up, which might relate to that German cuisine for those restaurants. My experience in Germany looking up soul food was very similar. So I had an idea that if I wanted to get authentic American Southern cuisine, I needed to look in those towns where I know that there were going to be some Black Americans. So anywhere where there was a military base around, or, you know, like near Kaiserslautern or Ramstein or Stuttgart, I felt like that's probably where I'm going to find something that's going to be a little similar to my understanding of soul food, because I know it's going to be, in my mind, more of a cultural connection to my American background. So, you know, and that is my perspective as far as how I see that concept. So, you know, like I said, it's not going to be comfortable, but I understand that people use this term soul food differently based upon their immediate interaction with it.
Mm-hmm. Good. Patrick, I don't know when you jump back in. You heard about the soul food queens and.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I love Reggie. You know, he covered all the best points. I would have never been able to do it. You know, because I come from this Haitian background, and I'm always looking up for Caribbean food. You know, like, you know, some kind of close cousin of Haitian food. And the great thing is when I go to like France, to Mulhouse, that area, you can get like the black mushrooms, the dried black mushrooms that my mom uses to make black rice. And of course, you always get it from the African Chinese, you know, international shop. And I'm always grateful for the Africans for that, that we're still very close in terms of the food culture to them. And I can get some things that I can, you know, make a nice Haitian dish, you know, and really feel a little bit like I'm back, you know, home with my mom and so on. So for me, that's what I'm always Googling, you know, Caribbean restaurants. And to the point that Reggie made, you know, I think it's just a business opportunity for someone here to open up a real soul food restaurant, you know, because we're missing that, you know, and I would love somebody could open up some, you know, Jamaican patty restaurants. I would love that here, you know. So these are opportunities, you know, for me, and I'm not gonna get, you know, upset with anybody if they want to name their restaurant a soul food restaurant, but it'd be nice if it was the real thing, you know. Yeah.
Nice. So while I still got you here, can you enlighten me onto what is something that's uniquely Haitian? So like a Haitian from the Haitian American diaspora. All I know is ça passe and Creole.
Yeah. Obviously, you know, speaking Creole is, you know, the culture. You know, for us in America, if you're Haitian, you should speak some Creole. But you know, when people hear me speaking it, because I'm second generation, you know, a Haitian person, a good friend of mine just laughed at me when I spoke Creole and said I speak it like a white man, you know. So I'm not necessarily, you know, the expert in Haitian culture either, you know. So yeah, but generally, yeah, for us, it's the food. It's the type of Caribbean food that you cook from home. That's the connection to Haitian culture in America for us. And then, you know, Jouy avec pois, you know, the traditional dishes, all of that is what we really connect to in America. And when it comes to Haitian culture, of course, the parties that go on till early in the morning, you know, Haitian parties always start really late, you know. If the host says come at 7, people will come at 11 or even at midnight, and then the party will go till 5 in the morning. That's also part of the culture, right? And of course, you know, Haitian culture in some ways, especially Haitian American culture, is, you know, getting an education, becoming a doctor, lawyer, and so on, you know, that kind of thing, you know. That's what dominates our culture in terms of what we're trying to get to when we get to the US, you know.
And I think Americans are stereotypically considered the ultimate optimists, almost to a fault.
Yeah.
However, as I was researching Haitians today, one quote kept coming up.
Yeah.
It said, "Beyond the mountains, there are more mountains."
I love
I'll say that again. So beyond the mountains, there are more mountains. And so that gave me the impression almost that Germans might be Haitians might be slightly more pessimistic than Americans in certain aspects. Can you confirm that, or was this just
pessimistic? We would say a little bit paranoid.
Paranoid. Okay.
Yeah, because, you know, the culture, you know, the people from this culture that is historically, you know, been looked down upon, you know, people forget that Haiti was liberated in 1803 before any Africans were liberated in the US, you know? And so we're very proud of that. You know, my parents are very proud of that, but, you know, Haitians have paid a huge price for that freedom over the last few centuries. And of course, you know, now being the poorest country in the Caribbean, people forget that, you know, these challenges that Haitians have faced have always been there because they took their freedom, you know, and so I can imagine Haitians thinking like this because we don't, you know, we kind of question the status quo when it comes to what you hear in the media, you know, and generally we have a little bit of a skepticism towards authority. Authority figures really are not someone that Haitians generally take whatever they say as 100% truth. We always try to look at the situation and look behind the power. And so I can imagine that saying has something to do with this idea that, yeah, there's always something behind what's going on. You know, you're never going to get the real truth just by looking at what's in front of you, you know? Yeah.
All right. And culturally, do you identify with that? Or do you think you're more of the American optimist?
I'm definitely, I learned to be more of an optimist because, you know, you can't totally, you know, survive in America by being, you know, skeptical of everything and distrustful of everyone.
But now you're here, actually.
Yeah. Well, you know,
I think that's almost a prerequisite for survival here.
Well, you know, I was here, as you explained, because of my partner and the situation that she had here made it better for us, for us to be here in Germany, and then the lifestyle here is exponentially more conducive to having a family than the lifestyle I had in New York. Yeah.
Would you say that you have integrated here?
Oh, no.
No. Okay.
I don't know if I ever will call myself integrated here.
Good. Yeah. Keep that energy. Reggie, would you say that you have integrated here?
I think it just depends on what day it is. You know what I mean? There are times when you can feel, as you know, incredibly lonely, and integration also is kind of a bit of a mystery, because it's up to you to build your own circle of friends, okay? You have to nurture and build new friendships. You have to get out there. You know, if you really want to integrate into German society, it's a lot of work that you have to do. And to be honest with you, there are times when I'm really not up for that particular kind of challenge. You know, I've found there were many times when I wondered, why was I here? Why have I made things so hard for myself? Will I ever get this language down? Will I ever, do I ever want to go back to the US? And here's another question when it comes to integration. There's always a wonder, people would say, are you going to go back? When are you returning? Are you waiting for me? Would you like me to leave or what? When are you going to go back? Even your family's like, when are you coming back? And so there's always a sense of division that you have, a part of you fears letting go of the roots that you've left behind. I mean, you don't see your family all the time. There's a part of you that, if you don't spend a lot of time back in the US, you can go back and kind of experience culture shock, reverse culture shock, I should say, excuse me. So whenever I go back to the States, here's the funny thing. When I go back to the US, guess what? I can't wait to get back to Germany. I cannot wait to get back to Germany whenever I go to the US. It never fails. Like, I'm looking at my watch and I'm wondering, when is the plane leaving? But okay, you just got here.
Can you give me an example of something you miss when you're in the States?
Oh, wow. To be honest with you, I just missed the landscape of Freiburg. I mean, like, if you just let me go into the forest, that's why I told you I like riding my bike. I didn't say bike, I like riding my bike. My bike is here. I miss my bicycle, which I left behind. Mm-hmm. And so I just miss the freedom to be out in nature. And as soon as I go back to the US, personally, I feel this pressure to suddenly, hate to say it, it's a cliche, keep up with the Joneses. I go back to the States and suddenly I'm aware of all of these material possessions that people have. And there's like an alarm going off. And I'm in a city, whether it's Philadelphia, whether it is Washington, D.C., but I don't know if the rest of you have experienced this. Please, confirm if this has actually happened to you. Your vision is suddenly kind of imprinted with a forest. So if I'm in DC and if I go into a hotel and that hotel is a skyscraper, once I open up my curtains, I'm like, yo, where's the forest at? So I'm in DC and I'm like looking around, or if I go back to especially downtown Philly, I'm like, there's something wrong. Why are there so many skyscrapers and why are these buildings so high? And so integration for me is something that perhaps sneaks up on you. And I think it just sort of, there are times when there's a part of you that really lets go and you're fully present living here in Germany. And then that's what I call integration. You have your circle of friends, you're not missing home too much, you're not divided, you're not wondering if I should be back in the States, maybe I could be doing this and that. You're not planning, as you said, we're very ambitious. You're not thinking about what else you could be doing, but you're fully present. And to me, that's what defines also integration. And so I would like to believe that my spirit and my heart is now European. I'm integrated in that regard. The practical tools, I still got to work on building a life of contentment where I can get around, understand the bureaucracy, read contracts. If you get your bank statements, I don't know. Sparkasse, they always send me things in language. I don't know what they're saying. Excuse me. I can't get this down. So I have some work to do, but yes, I feel integrated. Yes.
Okay, good. So we have you mentioned the linguistic aspect of
yes.
integration. Definitely, it's a
yes,
big
sir.
Esther, so you're pretty much talking from the outside in right now. Just really quick, did you ever feel integrated, maybe in the sense of Reggie or your own definition of integration here?
No. I always felt like I was on borrowed time in Germany because I think it was the context of how I came to Germany. So I didn't come to Germany with any connection to a resident, I wasn't in a relationship. I went to work at a university and then did a PhD program where all of that is, you know, and even in that experience with the people I worked with, all of that, like, we wanted to stay, but we never really felt like we were supposed to stay, because it's about, you know, learning and then moving on. Even if there were a few people that might have found permanent positions or postdoctoral positions, or the hope was, oh yes, you can stay, you should stay, it just never felt like there was a place for me in Freiburg. And I think it's going to what Reggie says, you know, I have tons of friends there and I loved all the communities that I built there, but there are certain things that one needs in life. For me, I'm very career focused, meaning that I'm not ambitious to where I just have to be in charge. I want to love everything I do at my job every single day. I want to love the people that I work with, and then I want to love the activities outside of my job that, you know, I get to engage in. And I want to know that there's a sense of security there. And in Germany, the contract system with jobs never gave me a sense of security. It was always like, am I going to get a contract renewal? Do I have to keep dealing with the Ausländerbehörde? You know, like, how am I going to make sure that I have this contract to be able to get an apartment, to be able to make sure I can stay, to be able to plan? And then the pandemic hit, and then it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do. and I have a daughter that I think about, and a mother that, you know, I want to also be able to afford to get on a plane if I need to, if something happened. And so, you know, for me, family is everything. I lost a brother right around the pandemic. I couldn't afford to go see him, you know, or go be at his memorial, and those type of things that I just really never felt that Germany could hold me long enough. Now, I love working in Germany. There's a lot of things about the German culture that I do miss. And especially as Reggie was saying, like the lack of materialism. Now, I did feel that creeping in to Freiburg. You know, I did feel a lot of that materialism, name brands, you know, what people are wearing, what people have, maybe in the younger generations. But as far as an inclusive work culture, I never felt that. I felt that it was great that I was there. Come learn. We want you to be able to learn with us and grow with us. But, you know, you might, if you can find a way to stay, you can, but you don't have to stay, you know. So that's kind of where I was. And then also I'm a very community service oriented person. From the neighborhood I came from, it's a neighborhood riddled with poverty, violence, and then also it's now in the process of development. And because I was teaching a lot about America and crime in America, I was always looking back to America to say, okay, there are a lot of these things happening, but there are not a lot of people, there weren't a lot of opportunities I felt like I could contribute to improving that. So I got tired of saying, you know, we've got these violent situations, or we got these neighborhoods where people are not getting enough resources, and we need people to change it. And I was like, wait a minute, now I have the PhD, I'm a lawyer, I can go back and do a lot of these things that I'm wanting somebody else to do, to be able to change that narrative, to be able to, you know, give people a different perception of not just what America is today, but the potential of what America can be tomorrow, especially Black America. And I wanted to participate in that. And that was also a very different feeling that I couldn't satisfy in Germany.
I can totally empathize and feel with that. That's a feeling I have daily. So one thing you mentioned, a lot of sort of objective hurdles to integration here, such as, you know, the working contracts, going to the Ausländerbehörde. So those are problems that anybody here can experience. However, I think in terms of integration, we as Black Americans, we face hurdles based on the American, and we face hurdles based on the Black aspect of it. So Patrick, you reacted very strongly when I asked if you integrated. Is there anything about the American part of you that faced hurdles integrating here? Is it difficult for you, for example, to adjust to the mentality based on your Americanness?
Well, yeah, well, that is, you know, the reason why I tried to develop a parallel mindset about my American ambition to build my own business and my need to have a job that pays my bills, you know? So because in Germany, you can't identify yourself by the work you do. People don't see that as being cultured. You know, culture here has nothing to do with what you do as a job, you know? And in America, it was the other way around, right? In America, what you do is who you are, you know? And if you don't have a title, if you don't, you know, if you're not, you know, some kind of entrepreneur, or if you're not working in a startup, especially in the tech world where, you know, I started out my career at, then you're not really in the in group in the US. And being, you know, Black, I wanted to still be in the in group on some level, right? And in Germany, the in groups are more of the social groups, you know, that the free time activity. What do you do in your free time? You know, go out hiking or do some kind of biking sports or something on that nature, go out dancing and so on. So for me, connecting with people on that level, you know, isn't usually hard, but it wasn't like where I felt the strongest, right? I felt strongest in the work world, but in the work world, nobody, you know, is cool with you just because you're really good at your job, you know. You've got to actually, you know, have some social skills. So that's the American coming out of me. Like, you know, I couldn't help it to realize that, oh, okay, for people, building businesses here is just a natural part of the social structure. It just happens. It's not like you're pushing and you're going to work day and night to build this business. Most businesses here are lifestyle businesses. They're based on the owner having a good connection with other people, you know, and then they come together and they build something that they enjoy. But in America, it's about, you know, capitalism, you know, you want to build something that will grow really quickly, you know. It's just not like the same here, you know, it's totally different.
Good. And Reggie, have you ever faced any hurdles based on your Black Americanness? You know, with focus on the Americanness. So I told you the anecdote, for example. I'll just tell the anecdote real quick because I only said it to you guys about Elvis. And so I was speaking to some German people one day, and they were asking me if I knew the lyrics to a few Elvis songs or the titles. And I said, no, I have no idea what this is. And then they basically said, what kind of American are you? And I grew up in an environment where, especially my grandmother and the older people almost had a really strong hatred or distaste for Elvis because they considered him the ultimate cultural appropriator. They considered him just a persona non grata. And in that case, in this incident, my Blackness and my Americanness sort of played together to create a nice tornado of discrimination. Reggie, do you have any sort of similar instances?
That's an excellent question. I don't always know the intention behind the obstacle that I am perceiving in front of me. So, for example, and then I'll get back to the whole thing with Germany in just a moment. Okay, so when you apply for English jobs, generally around the world, you may find yourself turned down because people generally associate being an American with being a quote unquote white person. So obviously, if you put together a CV and you apply, let's say to Asian countries, you always have to include a photograph. And that is how they often screen their applicants, you know, and you are expected to look a certain way if you want to work here. I don't know in Germany if I've lost out on any opportunities simply because I'm a quote unquote Black American. I'm not sure. And it's very important that I give this some thought to ask myself, you know, how well do I actually fit into some of these places? You know, I think the places where we actually have opportunities, they probably are places that are open to diversity. You can't force diversity. I don't want to be any place where I'm not wanted. I don't want to be any place where I am not wanted. So just to try to zero in on that, I don't know if I've even had an opportunity to discuss what it might be like to be a Black American, and if I've run into that problem. For example, when people generally approach me, I'm out in the community. If they ask me, where do you come from? If I say the States, they won't believe me. They'll look at me and they'll be like, no, really? No, really? You're like, no, I'm American, I assure you. Would you like to see some ID? Would you like to see my passport? I have it right here. Because they'll be like, nah, we know that you have some people, if you go far back enough, they gotta be from Africa. So the conversation becomes something completely different. I never really get an opportunity to discuss what it's like to be an American. That doesn't happen often. I am expected to know or be an expert on Africa. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen and experienced. It's bananas. I'm telling you, homie, who I am. So it does strike a nerve, but I'm always careful just to make sure that it's not, is it ignorance or is it racism? And I'm trying to be very careful about who I'm pointing that finger at and saying, oh, they're being racist. Oh, they're not accepting me because I'm Black. I'm trying to be very mindful of what kind of energy. And that's why I like to read into people and I try to see where's that coming from, because sometimes, you know, there are people that really want to know, you know, who are you really? I don't meet those kinds of people so often, but when I do, I'm open and we can have a discussion about what it means to be a quote unquote Black American. And I can talk to you about where I come from and my family and why I'm here in Germany and all of those types of things. But I'll tell you one thing that I wonder about at times, Jorrell. I'll tell you one thing, sir. What I notice is I often don't like to stir up trouble or complain. So, you know, the flat where I'm at, whenever there are issues, I notice that I'm very, very careful about bothering the Hausmeister, because I don't want to present myself as someone who is not happy. So there's a part of me that always feels like I gotta wear a little bit of this mask of always being like really in a good mood, when sometimes you just want to say, you know, to hell with everything, and you just want to kind of, you know, go off. And so if there's an obstacle that exists, I think that there sometimes is this exterior, this mask that sometimes you feel like you have to wear just to keep everybody okay. This guy's not an angry Black guy. He's a happy guy. He's cool. We get along. He doesn't complain. If you don't like it, you can leave. But I think that I'm trying to write my own story, and whatever obstacles are out there, I'm doing my best to get around them and handle them in a productive manner. And so I am very grateful for this discussion. I was very afraid about it. But yeah, so in other things, yeah, I don't know. I generally like working for myself. And so I'm not really applying to different places, you know, for work. I went to a couple of the other language schools. It is what it is. I wish everybody love and peace. I have no idea what's going on there, but I just like working for myself. So I've never really had to try to prove myself to any of the German establishment as a whole. I think that's been okay. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I'm happy.
That's sufficient. Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. So then the last part before we go into the audience questions for me is I'll tell my last anecdote. I'll be sticking my anecdotes from now. And it has something to do with what Reggie said. And my question to you is, how should I have reacted productively in this situation? Okay, because I don't know if you're fans of Dave Chappelle, but in one of his specials, he talked about those moments where it's so racist, you can just sit there and just say, that was racist. I don't know if you remember that special. I believe it was in San Francisco. And so I'll start with you, Esther. I want you to tell me how I should have reacted, because I just froze. So I was sitting at a tram stop, and a woman just sitting next to me kept looking over. And I could see her out of the corner of my eye. She kept looking. And so she said, wo kommen Sie her? So where are you from? And I said, aus Amerika, from America. And then she said, wo kommen Sie wirklich her? Typical question. I was prepared for that one, right? I said, aus Amerika. The next thing I wasn't prepared for, she went, aber Sie sind ein Neger, oder? And I wasn't ready for that. And I froze. Luckily, I don't know, the woman next to me on the other side heard this and started yelling at her. And all I could do was just freeze and think, what is this? Does this really happen? Esther, how should I have responded in this situation?
I think you responded perfectly like how I would have responded, because first to hear that word, even from a German, is not so common. It's almost like it has to be someone who just happened upon that word, or not happened upon that word, had heard that word and held on to it and just didn't have any interaction with any other type of progressive society to continue using that word. And then the idea that using that word in the context of questioning your Americanness shows that person, like, there are so many layers of questions about that person and who that person is that I would have just been like, okay, I need to go into deep psychoanalysis of who this person is before I respond. And so I would have done the same thing. And like you said, when it comes to these situations, it almost is fortunate that you might have somebody hearing it that says, oh no, you should not say that. That's terrible. Why are you saying this? And intervene on your behalf. Because sometimes we just have to process that in a way that we got to understand, like, what kind of person says that, does that, responds that way. There's so many layers there.
Okay, good. Thank you. It makes me feel a bit better. Patrick, do you have any tips for me? We gotta be quick.
No tips. You did the right thing. You kept your mouth shut because there's nothing you can do. It had nothing to do with you. It's all about that person, and they need to interact with someone who they consider to be like an alien. Like you just landed there from some other planet. They seem not to have a concept of Blackness in Germany. That it could be multifaceted. All right, so you did good.
Okay, thank you, Reggie.
Yeah, man, I think I agree with Esther and Patrick. I mean, I believe you handled that situation quite well. We have to be very careful at times. I could tell you something that would definitely warrant a lot of, expletive language, I should say. And you don't know, and I think just out of the need to protect yourself, there might have been a deeper part of you that was like, you know what? Let me not go off on this lady because this also might look bad. This could bring about trouble, and we don't need any police or anybody being called to the scene. And so I think that you always have to just trust your gut, and your gut protected you and it told you to chill. That's her problem. And that's a lot of things that you'll see. A lot of the times you got to make sure you don't take this kind of behavior on your shoulders. That's the other person. As my lady likes to say, that's that other person's business card. That's their business card. So you can just kind of remove yourself and just say, you know what? Yeah, she said something quite racist. You know it. But you know what? All the talking in the world probably won't change her mind if she's already made up her mind, especially if she's a certain, Anyway, I think you did the right thing, man. Good job.
All right. Thank you. So now I'll take some things from the chat here. So one person is very interested in the difference in police officers or policing in the two countries. And I don't know where Esther is, but Patrick. Oh, there's Esther. Okay. do you have any experiences with the German police, and do they differ from your experiences with the American police? Oh, I think we lost Patrick again.
No, I'm here.
Oh,
I thought you were talking to Esther. Yeah, of course,
No,
I
no.
have experiences with the German police. You know, they stopped me on my bike once, and I had to go to court. You know, I don't know why they thought they could do that. But long story short, I went to court, and everybody told me I would lose, and then I still won the case because I didn't do anything wrong. So it was a typical, you know, game for the police here in Germany to ticket a, you know, bicyclists, and maybe they picked me, maybe because I was Black, maybe they thought they could get me to pay up front, you know, I don't know. But at the end, you know, I went to court. I would not do that in the US. I would just give up, you know, because in the US, you know, you can already put an appeal in for any ticket that you get from the cops. But most likely if you go to court, you're going to lose, you know. So, but in Germany, I thought I had a fair chance, and I did. So you know, the German police have one level up in comparison to the American police for me, you know.
Okay. Just one level? Okay. Good.
Yeah, one
Reggie, do you have, no, Esther, actually, do you have any interactions with the German police, or have you had?
Yeah, mainly just in passing. If there was a problem, I haven't had any problems, a lot of feelings of discomfort. My daughter had a really bad experience with the police. There was an experience she had at a bar with a bartender, and where she was physically like assaulted and touched and kicked out of the bar. And when she told the police officer, he was friends with the bartender, and they were just laughing it up, and you know, and she didn't get any concern whatsoever about that situation. And you know, I've had that situation with the police here in the U.S., especially when I was younger. But one of the things that I was really shocked by moving back to the U.S. in Indianapolis, I haven't been to other parts of the country, but how extremely diverse the police force has become. Like now we've got people all shades of the rainbow in the Indianapolis, Indiana police force. We had in this last march, the police force marching with the protesters, the politics in the police. Now there's still a lot of them that are still the same. There are jerks, there are people that are still prejudiced, holding on to those attitudes. But there's a lot of change in the police force that I was not expecting. Like, for example, the captain or the sergeant that comes to our neighborhood meetings monthly, she's a Latina. And she is out there in the community all the time talking to us. She gives us her personal number, and she's been doing that for a while. So I think that's also something that, like, I knew I had to be mindful of, because I also grew up with police officers who were the parents of my close friends, ministers in my church. So, you know, my interaction with police were not just in the concept of when something went wrong, they were a part of my community. So, but seeing even the police officer I knew, who at the time growing up, they were one of the few police officer colored, now to see like all of these young, different shades and different generations of police officers on the streets, interacting, doing things like that, has just been so compelling for me in really showing how American society has changed, because now I'm interacting with them in different ways than just when something goes wrong.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Reggie, I'll change the question a little bit for you. So racial profiling is a term we all know, I hope. And you know, there are small studies in Germany that sort of talk about racial profiling and how the German police treat people of different races. However, there is huge resistance, especially from, I won't name any political parties, but certain politicians, there's huge resistance against making the study sort of German-wide, or making the study with a large enough sample size where you could say, ha, there's racial profiling. Reggie, why do you think there's such resistance here when regarding investigations into the racial behaviors of police?
I mean, you know, I think that from a quote unquote, you know, ideological point of view, there is a fear of dragging up any dirt from, you know, Germany's past history. This is kind of a taboo, and people would like to believe that, you know, that they've moved forward, that the society has become more tolerant, and that the police is far more educated. You know, when you had the whole thing with George Floyd, a lot of people would come up to me and they would say, Reggie, guess what I was checking out, you know, on the local news. I was like, yo, what happened? And they were like, it turns out that your police force is not very educated. It seems that anybody can become a police, and they don't even require a lot of training, but our training is much, much longer. So we went and we sat down and we talked about the education of the police in Germany versus the United States. And the United States kind of like, you know, presents itself. People often get the feeling that these police officers are not very civilized. They're brutes. You know what I mean? They don't recognize the importance of humanity and seeing everyone as equals. And so, you know, in Germany, people would like to believe that their local police, for the most part, you know, see everybody as the same. Why should we look into possible corruption? Why should we look into racism on behalf of our police force? That's not our police force. No, we don't have anybody like that here. Mm-hmm. And so even though it's out there, it's kind of like, it could be like one of the like a family secret that you kind of like bury under the rug. You know what I mean? And then you try to put the table on it and you see the huge bulge coming out of the rug. Like, look, why don't you guys take care of that problem? This is an issue. And so the only guess that I can, and again, we don't even know who's in charge of these studies, Jorrell. You know, we don't know who's in charge of this. You know, if you have a crooked cop and this person is in charge of these studies, they're going to want to make sure that their buddies are protected. You know what I'm saying? So if you start investigating, you know, what's happening like behind the scenes, you know, you might poke some skeletons out of that closet that people aren't ready to hear about, or that, you know, that don't want to know, because maybe they don't even have a protocol in place for that. You know what I'm saying? We often assume that justice is just going to be there when something wrong happens. It's just going to be there. If something goes down, it's going to be there. And we know in the US, it doesn't always work like that. It often doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I just think that it's a conversation that people are trying to kind of put off, you know, but, you know, it's just a guess. It's just a theory. I just don't think that the community as a whole is ready to have that conversation. And that might mean why they are reluctant to, you know, conduct such a study.
Okay, good, excellent. So we're going to wrap it up now, but I started off with a black or white question, and I'm going to end with a black or white question. I just want to hear a yes or no from you guys on this one, and hopefully this is some food for thought for people as they go home, and you could think and discuss why yes, why no, and so on and so forth. And so as I was reading arguments from people who are against these studies, you know, about racial profiling and, you know, taking statistics on jobs and income and stuff based on race, they said, by acknowledging racial differences, you are promoting them. Patrick, tell me yes if you think that's true, no if you think that's false.
It's false. It's just false. It is easy.
Good.
Yeah.
Reggie?
Could you please repeat the question for me?
Yeah, so this person said, by acknowledging racial differences, you are promoting them. Is that true or false?
Woo! And I can only say true or false. That's it.
Yep, you're not a lawyer. Yeah, we'll leave that to Esther.
Then I have to say it's false. I have to agree with Patrick.
Okay. And Esther?
False.
One more word? False. Good,
False.
excellent. All right, so I wholeheartedly agree with you in that case. So that's the first time I've sort of given my opinion. I agree that is a completely false statement, and I want that argument to die, please. So now I'll hand it over to Frederica, and she will take over from here. Thank you to everybody for listening to me for so long and answering my questions.
Well, thank you so much, Jorrell, for a really, really interesting and daring discussion as well. I love the black and white questions, and I think we have I learned a lot, and we have a long way to go. In between, you made me hungry. And this is where I'll get the chance to start our commercial block, because we'll have a New Orleans style Cajun dinner, I think on the 24th of June, if I'm not mistaken. And I also wanted to share the link to the conference again, to the Africa conference, and to our upcoming Transatlantic Tuesday in 2 weeks' time. Lawrence Douglas, a law professor from Amherst College, is visiting with an interesting talk about war atrocities, very tough talk. And some of his research has turned into the Netflix documentary, The Devil Next Door, by the way. So he's coming to do a lecture in 2 weeks' time. Yeah. We're also doing board game night, all sorts of stuff where people can get together. Reggie, I don't know when your next book club is up. Is it June or July?
I believe it's the first Friday in June. Yeah, it is June. It's not July, it's June. That's correct. Okay. You're right.
So you can sign up to Reggie's book club online as well, because it's still happening online, because he has a fan base in the Black Forest who doesn't want to travel down. Well, I mean, thank you. Thanks to all 4 of you near and far, to you, Esther, in Indianapolis. I thought it was a really insightful, wonderful discussion. As I already said, we'll continue to ask questions that might be stupid and be daring, just as I think Jorrell encouraged us to face an open conversation. And thank you to Professor Mela that you joined us, and we're looking forward to your conference. So, and we are putting this discussion as soon as we can online on YouTube for anyone interested. So if you want to share it, just check out our YouTube channel, Carl-Schurz-Haus. Thank you all. Have a good night.